The blizzard had come down from the mountains without warning, and Clara Sheffield knew she was going to die out here if she didn't find shelter soon. She had been traveling alone for 3 days. Her horse had gone lame that morning, and now the white snow was falling so thick she could barely see her own frozen hands clutching the reins. The animal limped beside her as she trudged through drifts that reached her knees, each step a monumental effort against the wind that cut through her wool coat like it was made of paper. She had left Sacramento with such hope, carrying letters of introduction to a teaching position in a mining town east of the Sierras. But now, in January of 1884, that dream seemed as distant as the sun she could no longer see through the storm. Her feet had gone numb an hour ago. She stumbled, caught herself, kept moving because stopping meant freezing to death. The landscape had transformed into an endless white void where sky and earth merged into one disorienting wall of snow. Clara pulled her scarf tighter around her face, ice crystals forming on the wool where her breath touched it. 23 years old, and this was how it would end, frozen solid in the mountains, her body not discovered until spring thaw. Her mother had warned her against traveling alone, but Clara had always been stubborn, always insisted she could take care of herself. The horse whinnied, a sound of distress that cut through the howling wind. Clara stopped, her eyes scanning the white emptiness around her. Nothing. Just snow and more snow and the terrible cold that was slowly stealing the life from her body. She couldn't feel her toes anymore. Her fingers were stiff and clumsy inside her gloves. Ice had formed on her eyelashes, making it even harder to see. Then she heard it. A voice, distant but unmistakably human, calling out through the storm. Clara tried to shout back, but her voice came out as barely more than a croak. She pushed forward, dragging her exhausted horse behind her, moving toward where she thought the voice had come from. The snow was falling harder now, thick flakes that clung to everything, and Clara realized with a sick feeling that she was probably completely covered in white, camouflaged against the storm itself. The voice called again, closer this time. Clara managed to raise one arm, waving it frantically, even though the movement sent fresh waves of cold through her body. She tried to call out again, managed something louder this time, a desperate cry for help that the wind snatched away almost before it left her lips. Then suddenly, there was a figure emerging from the white, a man on horseback, and Clara's knees buckled with relief. She started to fall, and strong arms caught her, pulled her against a chest that felt impossibly warm even through layers of clothing. "I've got you," the man said, his voice rough but steady. "I've got you now." Clara looked up into a face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat and a bandana pulled up against the cold, but she could see his eyes, dark and intense and fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something flickered across his features, something that looked almost like recognition, but that didn't make any sense because Clara had never seen this man before in her life. "My horse," Clara managed through chattering teeth. "He's lame, I can't leave him." "I'll take care of him," the man promised. He was already shrugging out of his heavy coat, wrapping it around Clara's shoulders even though that left him in just a thick wool shirt. "Can you ride?" Clara nodded, though in truth she wasn't sure. The man lifted her onto his horse with surprising ease, then swung up behind her, one arm wrapping around her waist to hold her steady. With his other hand, he gathered the reins of her horse, clicking his tongue to get the lame animal moving. "There's a cabin about half a mile from here," he said, his voice close to her ear. "We'll shelter there until the storm passes." Clara wanted to ask who he was, what he was doing out in this blizzard, why he had been calling out into the storm, but her teeth were chattering too hard to form words. She leaned back against his chest, absorbing his warmth, and let herself drift in a haze of cold and exhaustion. The ride to the cabin felt both endless and impossibly short. One moment they were surrounded by white, and the next they were dismounting in front of a small structure that looked like it had been built directly into the mountainside. The man helped Clara down, keeping one hand on her elbow to steady her as he pushed open the door. Inside was dark and cold but blessedly free of wind and snow. The man settled Clara on a wooden bench near what looked like a fireplace, then moved with efficient purpose around the small space. Within minutes, he had a fire going, the flames casting dancing shadows on the rough log walls. Clara watched him work, her mind slowly clearing as warmth began to seep back into her frozen limbs. He was tall, she realized, probably close to 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and the kind of lean, muscular build that came from years of hard physical work. When he pulled down the bandana that had been covering the lower half of his face, Clara saw strong features, a straight nose, a firm jaw dark with several days' worth of stubble. He looked to be somewhere in his late 20s, though the lines around his eyes suggested a man who had seen his share of hard living. "Let me look at your hands," he said, kneeling in front of her. His voice was gentler now, though still carrying that rough edge. Frostbite can set in quick in weather like this. Clara pulled off her gloves with clumsy fingers. Her hands were white and waxy looking, which apparently wasn't good because the man's expression tightened. He cupped her hands between his own, rubbing gently to restore circulation. The sensation as feeling began to return was excruciating, like being stabbed with 1,000 needles all at once. Clara bit back a cry. "I know it hurts," the man said. "That's good, though. Means the tissue isn't dead. Your feet next." Clara's cheeks flushed hot despite the cold. "I can manage my feet. Can you?" He looked pointedly at her hands, which were shaking so badly she could barely control them. "Madam, this isn't the time for modesty. Frostbite will take your toes if we don't warm them up proper." He was right, of course. Clara nodded reluctantly, and the man helped her remove her boots, revealing stockings that were soaked through. He peeled those off too with clinical efficiency, revealing feet that looked as pale and lifeless as her hands had. The same terrible needling pain began as he warmed them, rubbing circulation back into frozen flesh. "Thank you," Clara managed. "You saved my life." The man glanced up at her, and again that strange expression crossed his face, something intense and searching. "What's your name?" "Clara Sheffield. I was traveling to a teaching position in Aurora, but I think I got turned around in the storm. I've been lost for hours." "Aurora's a good 50 miles south of here," the man said. "You got turned around pretty bad. This is still Nevada, but we're up near the California border." "Name's Harrison Xavier." "Mr. Xavier," Clara said, "I'm in your debt." "Harrison," he corrected, "and you don't owe me anything." He stood, moving to check on her horse, which he had brought into the cabin along with his own. The space was small enough that having 2 horses inside made it feel crowded, but Clara understood the necessity. Leaving them outside in the storm would have been a death sentence. As Harrison tended to the animals, rubbing them down and offering them water from a bucket he filled with melted snow, Clara studied him more closely. There was something almost familiar about him, though she knew they had never met. Perhaps it was just that he had the look of the West about him, that particular combination of self-reliance and weathered strength that she had seen in so many men since leaving Sacramento. "What were you doing out in the storm?" Clara asked. "I heard you calling before you found me." Harrison's hand stilled on her horse's flank. For a long moment he didn't answer, and Clara wondered if perhaps the question had been too personal. But then he turned to face her, and the expression in his dark eyes was so raw and vulnerable that it took her breath away. "Looking for you," he said simply. Clara blinked. "I'm sorry. I've been searching for you." Harrison crossed the cabin in 2 long strides, dropping to his knees in front of her again. "I know how that sounds. I know you must think I'm out of my mind. But 3 weeks ago I had a dream, so vivid it felt more real than waking. I saw a woman with hair the color of honey, caught in a blizzard, freezing to death. I saw her collapse in the snow and I couldn't reach her, couldn't save her. I woke up with my heart pounding, covered in sweat, and I just knew it was a vision of something that was going to happen." Clara stared at him, unable to form words. This was impossible. People didn't have prophetic dreams about strangers. And yet here she was, exactly as he had described, saved from a blizzard that would have killed her. "I've been watching the weather," Harrison continued, his words coming faster now as if they had been bottled up inside him for weeks. "Waiting for the storm I saw in my dream. When the snow started falling this morning, I knew this was the day. So I rode out searching, calling into the white even though I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. And then I found you." He reached out, his hand hovering near her face but not quite touching. "The snow had covered you so completely, I almost rode right past. But then you moved, raised your arm, and suddenly I could see you. The snow made you visible against all that white, like you were the only real thing in the entire storm." "This is madness," Clara whispered, but even as she said it, she felt something stirring in her chest, some deep recognition that went beyond logic or reason. "I know." Harrison's hand dropped back to his lap. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. You must be terrified." "I'm not," Clara said, surprised to realize it was true. She should be frightened. She was trapped in a tiny cabin in the middle of a blizzard with a man she didn't know, a man who claimed to have dreamed about her. But instead of fear, what she felt was something else entirely, something warm and electric that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. "Tell me more. What else did you see in your dream?" Harrison's eyes searched her face. "You were alone, exhausted. Your horse was injured. You kept pushing forward even though you could barely stand because you're stubborn as hell and won't give up even when you should." A small smile tugged at his lips. "Sound about right." Clara let out a breathless laugh. "Uncomfortably accurate. I saw something else too." Harrison's voice dropped lower, more intimate. "I saw us in the future, together. I saw you smiling at me like I was your whole world. I saw myself holding you, keeping you safe, loving you like I'd never loved anything in my life. I saw decades stretched out ahead of us, a whole lifetime of moments I can't wait to live through." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "You can't possibly know that. You don't even know me. I know you're brave. You were traveling alone, which means you don't let fear stop you from going after what you want. I know you care about animals because your first thought when you were freezing to death was for your horse. I know you're strong because you kept going long past the point where most people would have laid down and given up." Harrison leaned forward, his intensity almost overwhelming. "I know that from the moment I saw you in that dream. Something in my chest cracked open, like a part of me I didn't even know was missing suddenly clicked into place. And when I found you today, when I pulled you into my arms, that feeling got 1,000 times stronger." "This is insane," Clara said, but her voice was shaking. "People don't fall in love based on dreams. That's not how the world works." "Then how do you explain what you're feeling right now?" Harrison challenged. "Because I can see it in your eyes, Clara. You feel it too, this connection between us. Like we were always meant to find each other." Clara wanted to deny it, wanted to be rational and sensible and all the things a proper young woman should be. But she had never been good at lying, especially to herself. And the truth was that Harrison was right. From the moment he had caught her in the snow, from the first instant she had looked into his eyes, Something had shifted inside her. Something fundamental and terrifying and wonderful. "I do feel something," she admitted quietly, "but that doesn't mean it's real. Maybe it's just gratitude because you saved my life, or shock from the cold, or any number of perfectly logical explanations that don't involve prophetic dreams and destiny. Maybe." Harrison sat back on his heels, giving her space. "Or maybe sometimes the universe knows what it's doing. Maybe some connections are meant to be." He stood, moving to his saddlebags. "Either way, you're freezing and exhausted. Let me make you some coffee and get you warm. We can figure out the rest later." As Harrison worked to prepare coffee over the fire, Clara found herself watching him with an intensity that would have embarrassed her under normal circumstances. The way he moved, economical and precise, spoke of years spent living rough. The way he handled the tin cup and coffee grounds, the way he adjusted the logs in the fire, all of it demonstrated a competence that Clara found deeply attractive. He caught her watching and flashed her a quick smile that transformed his whole face, making him look younger and more carefree. Clara felt her breath catch. God, he was handsome. Not in a pretty way, but in a rugged, masculine way that made her think of all the romance novels she had devoured as a girl, the ones her mother had said would fill her head with nonsense about dashing heroes and unlikely love. "You live around here?" Clara asked, as much to distract herself from her own thoughts as anything else. "I've got a ranch about 10 miles north," Harrison said. "Just me and a couple of hands raising cattle and horses. It's hard work but honest. I've been out here about 5 years now, came from Texas originally." "Texas is a long way from Nevada." "It is." Something dark crossed Harrison's features. "I left after my parents died. Fever took them both within a week of each other. Couldn't stand to stay in the house where I'd grown up. Everywhere I looked there were memories. So I sold the place, took what money I had, and headed west. Ended up here and decided it was as good a place as any to start over." "I'm sorry about your parents," Clara said softly. "It was 4 years ago. Still hurts, but time helps." Harrison poured coffee into a battered tin cup and brought it to Clara. "What about you? What brings a schoolteacher out into the wilderness?" Clara wrapped her hands around the cup, savoring the warmth. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it was hot, and that was what mattered. "My father died 2 years ago, left my mother and me with more debts than assets. Mother went to live with her sister in San Francisco, but I wanted to make my own way. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Aurora, it seemed perfect. Good salary, room and board provided. I could save money, maybe eventually go to college in the East. That's ambitious. Is that a polite way of saying I'm foolish? No." Harrison settled onto the bench beside her, close enough that Clara could feel the heat radiating from his body. "It's a genuine compliment. Most women wouldn't have the courage to strike out on their own like that. Hell, most men wouldn't either." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking coffee and listening to the storm rage outside. The cabin was small and crude, probably a shepherd's shelter or a way station for travelers, but with the fire going and her body finally beginning to thaw, Clara felt almost cozy. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said eventually. "About your dream. You said you saw us together in the future. What were we doing?" Harrison turned to look at her, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "All sorts of things. I saw us sitting on a porch watching the sunset. I saw you in a garden, planting vegetables, wearing a blue dress with flour on your hands because you'd been baking. I saw us riding together across open range, racing our horses like a couple of kids. I saw us in bed together." His voice dropped on that last part, becoming rough with something that might have been desire. "I saw decades worth of small moments that make up a life. Breakfast conversations, Arguments over stupid things, making up after those arguments. I saw us old and gray, still holding hands, still looking at each other like we were the best thing that ever happened to one another. Clara's throat felt tight. That's a beautiful dream. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a promise. Like a glimpse of what could be if I was brave enough to reach for it. Harrison shifted slightly, angling his body toward hers. I know this is fast. I know I sound like a madman, but I learned something when my parents died. Life is short and uncertain, and we don't get unlimited time to figure things out. Sometimes you have to take a chance. Sometimes you have to be willing to look crazy in pursuit of something real. And you think this is real, Clara gestured between them. This connection you feel, I know it is. Harrison reached out slowly, giving Clara plenty of time to pull away, and cupped her cheek in his palm. His hand was warm and slightly rough, calloused from years of ranch work. Tell me you don't feel it and I'll back off. I'll make sure you get safely to Aurora and I'll never bother you again. But if you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling right now, then give this a chance. Give us a chance. Clara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was madness. She had known this man for less than an hour. She didn't believe in prophetic dreams or love at first sight or any of the romantic nonsense she had always dismissed as fiction. But her heart was pounding, and her skin was tingling where he touched her, and something deep in her chest was unfurling like a flower in spring sun. I feel it, she whispered. God help me, I feel it too. Harrison made a sound low in his throat, something between a groan and a sigh of relief. Then he was kissing her, his lips capturing hers with a gentleness that belied the intensity she could feel thrumming through his body. Clara's hands came up to clutch at his shoulders, her fingers digging into the worn fabric of his shirt, as she kissed him back with an urgency that surprised her. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and desperate, like they were both trying to make up for lost time even though they had just met. Harrison's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Clara went willingly, pressing herself against the solid warmth of his body. She could feel his heart pounding against her chest, could taste coffee on his tongue, could smell leather and horses and wood smoke on his skin. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. I've been waiting for you my whole life, he said roughly. I just didn't know it until 3 weeks ago. Clara's eyes were wet with tears she couldn't quite explain. I don't understand any of this. I don't understand how I can feel so much for someone I just met. It doesn't make sense. Love doesn't have to make sense. Harrison pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. It just has to be true. And this is true, Clara. I'd stake my life on it. Outside, the storm continued to howl, but inside the little cabin, wrapped in Harrison's arms with the fire crackling merrily, Clara felt safer and more certain than she had in years. She let herself sink into the feeling, into the impossible rightness of being exactly where she was. They talked for hours as the storm raged on, sharing stories and secrets, learning each other in the way of people who know they have found something precious and rare. Harrison told her about his ranch, about the hard work of building something from nothing, about his dreams of expanding the herd and maybe one day having a family to pass it all on to. Clara told him about her childhood in Sacramento, about her love of teaching, about the books she had read and the places she dreamed of seeing. As evening drew on and the light outside began to fail, Harrison checked their supplies. There was enough food for a few days if they were careful, and the cabin's roof was sound despite its age. They would be safe here until the storm passed, which according to Harrison's reading of the weather could be anywhere from 1 to 3 days. You should sleep, Harrison said, pulling a bedroll from his pack. You've been through hell today. Your body needs rest. Where will you sleep? Clara asked. I'll keep the fire going, make sure it doesn't go out during the night. Don't worry about me. I've slept in worse conditions than this. That's ridiculous. Clara stood, her body protesting after sitting for so long. She was stiff and sore, her muscles aching from the long trek through the snow. We can share. I trust you. Harrison looked like he wanted to argue, but finally he nodded. They arranged the bedroll near the fire, close enough to benefit from the warmth but not so close as to be in danger from stray sparks. It was barely large enough for 2 people, which meant they would have to sleep close, but Clara found she didn't mind. The thought of being held in Harrison's arms all night was more appealing than it should have been. They laid down together, Harrison's chest pressed against Clara's back, his arm draped over her waist. It should have felt awkward or presumptuous, but instead it felt completely natural, like they had been sleeping this way for years rather than hours. Clara. Harrison's voice was quiet in the darkness. Yes. I'm glad I found you, glad you're alive. Even if you decide tomorrow that I'm crazy and you want nothing to do with me, I'll still be glad I got to meet you. Clara turned in his arms, shifting until she could see his face in the firelight. I won't think that tomorrow. I might be confused, I might be overwhelmed, but I won't think you're crazy. She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. I think you're the sanest thing that's happened to me in a very long time. Harrison caught her hand, bringing it to his lips and pressing a kiss to her palm. Get some sleep. We'll figure everything out in the morning. But Clara didn't want to sleep. She wanted to memorize every detail of this moment. The way Harrison's eyes softened when he looked at her. The way his body curved protectively around hers. The way his breathing gradually slowed and deepened as he drifted off. She wanted to hold onto this feeling, this certainty that something monumental had just shifted in her life. When she finally did sleep, her dreams were full of images that felt more like memories than fantasies. She saw herself in a house she had never been to, cooking in a kitchen that felt like home. She saw Harrison riding toward her across a field of wildflowers, his face lighting up when he spotted her. She saw children, 2 boys and a girl, with her honey-colored hair and Harrison's dark eyes. She saw a lifetime stretched out ahead of them, exactly as Harrison had described. She woke to weak morning light filtering through the cracks in the cabin walls and the realization that the storm had passed. Harrison was already awake, sitting by the fire and watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. Morning, he said softly. How do you feel? Confused, overwhelmed, absolutely terrified. Clara sat up, pushing her hair back from her face. And completely certain that everything you said yesterday was true. How is that possible? Harrison's face broke into a grin so bright it was like the sun coming out. Come here. Clara went to him, and he pulled her down onto his lap, cradling her against his chest. They sat like that for a long time, not talking, just being together and watching the fire burn down to coals. What do we do now? Clara asked eventually. I'm supposed to be in Aurora. They're expecting me. Are you still planning to go? Clara was quiet for a long moment, thinking. The teaching position had seemed so important just yesterday, the key to her independence and future. But now, with Harrison's arms around her and the memory of his kiss still burning on her lips, it felt like a door closing on a life she had already moved beyond. No, she said slowly. I don't think I am. Is that crazy? To give up everything I plan based on one day with a man I barely know, maybe. Harrison pressed a kiss to the top of her head. But I don't think it is. I think it's the bravest thing you could do. Trust yourself. Trust this feeling. Trust me. I do trust you. Clara tilted her head back to look at him. That's the strangest part. I shouldn't, but I do, completely. Then stay. Come to my ranch, see my life, let me show you what I'm offering. If you don't like it, if you change your mind, I'll personally escort you to Aurora or anywhere else you want to go. But give us a real chance. Give yourself time to know if this is just infatuation or something deeper. Clara thought about the dreams she had had, the visions that had felt so real. She thought about the way her heart had recognized Harrison before her mind had caught up. She thought about her mother's advice before she had left Sacramento. Don't be so focused on your plans that you miss out on living. Okay, she said. I'll come to your ranch. I'll give us a chance. Harrison's arms tightened around her, and when he kissed her this time, it was with a passion that left them both breathless and wanting more. But he pulled back with visible effort, his breathing ragged. We should wait, he said roughly. Do this proper. Court you the way you deserve. I won't have you regretting anything. Clara appreciated the sentiment even as her body protested. She had never felt desire like this before, had never understood what the fuss was about when other women whispered about their husbands. But now, pressed against Harrison with his hands on her waist and his lips swollen from kissing, she understood perfectly. They spent another day at the cabin, waiting for the snow to pack down enough to make travel easier. They talked more, learning each other's histories in greater detail. Harrison told her about his childhood in Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk, about the pain of watching his parents waste away from fever while feeling helpless to save them. Clara told him about her father's slow decline after a fall from a horse left him partially paralyzed, about the financial struggles that had plagued their family, about her determination to never be dependent on anyone. But you're willing to depend on me? Harrison asked, not challenging but genuinely curious. It's different with you, Clara tried to explain. It doesn't feel like losing my independence. It feels like gaining a partner. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Harrison took her hand, lacing their fingers together. That's what I want us to be. Partners. Equals. I'm not looking for someone to cook and clean and keep quiet. I want someone who will challenge me, argue with me when I'm wrong, ride beside me, not behind me. I can definitely argue with you when you're wrong, Clara said with a small smile. I've been told I'm quite stubborn. Good. I'd hate for this to be boring. On the third day after the storm, they set out for Harrison's ranch. The journey took most of the day, their progress slowed by snow drifts and the fact that Clara's horse was still favoring his lame leg. Harrison fashioned a rough travois to make the animal's burden easier, and they took frequent breaks to rest. The landscape was breathtaking in its winter severity, all white peaks and dark pines and endless blue sky. Clara found herself falling in love with this harsh, beautiful country. It was so different from the gentle hills around Sacramento, so much more dramatic and unforgiving. But there was a purity to it, an honesty. Here, you couldn't hide from the truth of things. The land demanded strength and resilience, and Clara discovered she had plenty of both. They rode into the ranch just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the snow gold and orange. The house was larger than Clara had expected, a sturdy two-story structure built of logs and stone. There was a barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, several corrals, and what looked like the beginnings of additional outbuildings. You've built all this in 5 years, Clara asked, impressed despite herself. Me and the men who work for me, we've worked hard. Harrison helped her down from her horse, his hands lingering on her waist. It's not fancy, but it's solid. Room to grow. 2 men emerged from the bunkhouse, clearly curious about their boss's unexpected companion. Harrison introduced them as Jack and Tom, cowboys who had been with him for 3 years. Both were polite to Clara, tipping their hats and welcoming her, but she could see the questions in their eyes. Clara's going to be staying on for a while, Harrison said. his tone making it clear that no further explanation was required or would be provided. "Tom, can you see to her horse? He's got a bad leg that needs tending. Jack, is there hot water? Miss Sheffield has had a rough few days." The men jumped to do Harrison's bidding, and he led Clara into the house. The interior was as solid as the exterior, rough-hewn but comfortable. There was a large main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast-iron stove, and stairs leading to what Clara assumed were bedrooms above. "It's wonderful," Clara said honestly. "You've made a real home here. It's been a house. I'm hoping you'll help me make it a home." Harrison moved to stoke the fire, which had burned down to embers while he was gone. "There are 2 bedrooms upstairs. You can have your pick." "I want you comfortable here, Clara. I want you to feel like this could be your place too." Over the following weeks, Clara settled into life on the ranch with surprising ease. Harrison had been right about wanting a partner rather than a traditional wife. He asked her opinion on everything from which cattle to sell to where to plant the kitchen garden come spring. He taught her to ride better, to rope, to read the weather and the land. In turn, she taught him things too, reading aloud to him in the evenings from books she ordered from a catalog, sharing stories and ideas, helping him write letters to potential buyers for his cattle. They courted in the old-fashioned sense, with Harrison keeping a respectful distance even when Clara could see the desire burning in his eyes. They took long walks together through the snow, rode out to check on the herd, sat by the fire in the evenings talking for hours. Harrison was attentive and thoughtful, bringing her small gifts, a book he thought she would like, a ribbon for her hair bought on a trip to the nearest town, a bouquet of evergreen branches since flowers were impossible in winter. But it was the quiet moments that Clara treasured most. The way Harrison looked at her across the dinner table like she was the most fascinating person he had ever met. The way he reached for her hand without thinking when they walked together. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, like every word she said mattered. The way he made her laugh with dry observations about ranch life or silly stories from his childhood. 6 weeks after they met, on a clear February night with the stars blazing overhead, Harrison asked her to marry him. They were sitting on the porch, bundled in heavy coats, watching the moon rise over the mountains. Harrison had been quiet all evening, clearly working up to something, and Clara had been waiting with her heart in her throat. "Clara," he said finally, turning to face her. "I know it hasn't been long. I know by conventional standards we should wait longer, get to know each other better. But I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I know that I want to spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy. I know that I want to build a future with you, raise children with you, grow old with you. So I'm asking, even though it's fast and maybe foolish and definitely unconventional, will you marry me?" Clara felt tears spilling down her cheeks, hot against her cold skin. "Yes, absolutely yes." Harrison let out a whoop of joy that probably woke every animal on the ranch, then swept Clara into his arms and spun her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her with all the pent-up passion of the past 6 weeks, and Clara kissed him back with equal fervor. "I don't have a ring yet," Harrison said when they finally broke apart. "I'll get you one, the prettiest one I can find, but it might take a few weeks to—" "I don't need a ring," Clara interrupted. "I just need you." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Jack and Tom as witnesses and a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through the area. Clara wore a dress she had altered from her teaching clothes, simple but elegant in dove gray wool. Harrison wore his Sunday best and looked so handsome that Clara's breath caught when she saw him waiting for her at the makeshift altar they had set up in the main room. The ceremony was brief, but meaningful. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Harrison's kiss was gentle and reverent, a promise of things to come. They celebrated with a dinner that Clara had spent 2 days preparing, roast beef and potatoes, and pie made from preserved fruit. Jack pulled out a fiddle Clara hadn't known he possessed and played while Tom sang in a surprisingly good baritone. That night, Harrison carried Clara up the stairs to the bedroom they would now share. He had spent the past week fixing it up, painting the walls, building new furniture, making it as nice as he could. There was a real bed with a proper mattress, a dresser, even a mirror, but Clara barely noticed any of it. Her attention was entirely on her husband, on the way he looked at her like she was something precious and rare. "Are you nervous?" Harrison asked softly, setting her down beside the bed. "No." Clara reached up to begin unbuttoning his shirt. "I trust you completely." "I'll be gentle," Harrison promised. "If anything hurts or you want to stop, you tell me." But there was no need for him to be overly cautious. Clara wanted him, with an intensity that surprised them both. Their coming together was passionate and tender by turns, awkward in the way of first times but also achingly perfect. Harrison was patient and attentive, making sure Clara found her pleasure before seeking his own. And when they finally lay tangled together, sweaty and satisfied and utterly content, Clara felt like she had finally come home. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." Harrison's arms tightened around her. "I love you too. More than I have words for. You're everything I didn't know I needed, Clara. Everything I dreamed about and more." Spring came slowly to the mountains, the snow retreating inch by reluctant inch to reveal brown earth and the first brave shoots of green. Clara threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, planting a garden, helping with the spring roundup, learning to manage the household accounts. She wrote to her mother, explaining what had happened and inviting her to visit. Her mother's response was cautious but supportive, expressing concerns about the hastiness of the marriage but ultimately trusting Clara's judgment. In May, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Harrison over breakfast one morning, watching nervously for his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We're going to have a baby. Next winter, I think. January or February." Harrison was around the table in an instant, pulling Clara into his arms. "This is the best news. The absolute best. You've made me the happiest man alive." The pregnancy was relatively easy, for which Clara was grateful. She tired more easily, and her morning sickness was unpleasant, but she stayed active, continuing to help with ranch work well into the fall. Harrison became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing anything he deemed too strenuous, which led to their first real argument. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Clara snapped one October afternoon when Harrison tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time and somehow managing to work too." "I just want to keep you safe," Harrison protested. "You and the baby. And I appreciate that. But you have to let me live my life. I'll be careful, I promise, but I won't be treated like an invalid for 9 months." They found a compromise, with Clara agreeing to let Harrison or one of the ranch hands help with the heaviest work while still maintaining her independence. It was a lesson they both needed to learn, the art of balancing care with respect for autonomy. In December, when the snow began to fall again, Clara found herself thinking about that first storm, about the blizzard that had brought her and Harrison together. It felt like a lifetime ago rather than just 1 year. So much had changed, and yet the core of what they had found in that tiny cabin remained unchanged, a bone-deep certainty that they belonged together. "What are you thinking about?" Harrison asked, coming up behind her as she stood at the window watching the snow fall. "About the day we met. About how I nearly died out there in the storm. About how you found me just in time." Harrison wrapped his arms around her, his hands resting on her swollen belly. "I'll always find you. No matter where you are, no matter what storm you're facing, I'll always find my way to you." The baby came on a frigid January night with wind howling around the house like a living thing. Harrison rode out through dangerous conditions to fetch the midwife from the nearest ranch, a woman named Martha, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara wondered if she would survive it. But Harrison never left her side, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, being her anchor in the storm. At dawn, just as the wind finally died down, their son was born. He came into the world screaming his displeasure at the cold and the light, a healthy, sturdy boy with dark hair and a furious expression. "He's perfect," Harrison breathed, tears streaming down his face as Martha placed the cleaned and wrapped baby in his arms. "Clara, he's absolutely perfect." They named him Henry, after Harrison's father, and from the moment Clara held him, she understood a new dimension of love. She had thought she loved Harrison with every fiber of her being, but this was different, primal, and fierce. She would burn the world down for this tiny person, would do anything to keep him safe and happy. Harrison proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with Henry when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, sitting beside the cradle for hours just watching his son sleep. Clara would often find him talking to the baby, telling him stories about the ranch, about Texas, about the day Clara had appeared in his dream. "You think he understands you?" Clara teased one afternoon, finding Harrison having what appeared to be a serious conversation with 3-month-old Henry about cattle breeding. "Of course he does," Harrison said seriously. "He's a very intelligent baby, advanced for his age. Every parent thinks that about their child." "Yes, but in our case it happens to be true." Harrison looked up at her with a grin that made him look years younger. "Come here." Clara settled beside him, and Harrison pulled her close with his free arm, the baby cradled between them. They sat like that in comfortable silence, a family, complete and content. The years flowed by, marked by seasons and growth. Henry grew into a curious, energetic toddler who kept Clara and Harrison constantly on their toes. The ranch prospered, allowing them to expand the herd and hire more hands. Clara's mother came to visit and ended up staying for 6 months, won over by Harrison's kindness and by the clear love between her daughter and son-in-law. When Henry was 3, Clara became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, and she spent the last 2 months confined mostly to bed rest. Their second son, Hugh, was born in August of 1888, a summer baby who came easily compared to his brother. Hugh was quieter than Henry, more contemplative, with Clara's hazel eyes and a sweet disposition that won hearts effortlessly. 2 years later, their daughter arrived. Caroline was born during a thunderstorm, as if announcing from the beginning that she would be a force to be reckoned with. She had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn streak, and Clara often joked that Caroline was divine retribution for all the trouble Clara herself had caused as a child. The house that had once seemed too big for just Harrison, and Clara now felt perfectly sized for their growing family. The boys shared a room. Caroline had a small bedroom of her own, and the sounds of children's laughter filled spaces that had been quiet for too long. Harrison was a wonderful father, patient and loving but firm when needed. He taught the boys to ride and rope, how to care for animals, how to respect the land. He read to Caroline every night, indulging her love of stories and her endless questions about the world. And through it all, he never forgot to make time for Clara, to remind her daily that she was loved and cherished and appreciated. On their 10th anniversary, Harrison took Clara back to the cabin where they had weathered the storm together. It was summer now, the mountains green and lush, wildflowers carpeting the meadows. They left the children with Martha and spent 2 days alone, remembering and celebrating everything they had built together. "You ever regret it?" Harrison asked as they lay together in the same spot where they had slept that first night. "Giving up teaching, changing all your plans?" "Never," Clara said without hesitation. "Not for a single second. This life with you, our children, the ranch, it's so much better than anything I could have planned. I didn't know what I really wanted until I found you." "I still have that dream sometimes," Harrison admitted. "The one where I saw you in the storm. Except now when I find you, when I pull you into my arms, the ending is different. I see everything we've lived through. I see Henry and Hugh and Caroline. I see us getting older but still holding hands, still choosing each other every single day. And I wake up so grateful that the dream came true." Clara turned in his arms to face him. At 33, Harrison was even more handsome than he had been at 28, his face more weathered but his eyes still holding that same intensity when he looked at her. "I love you. I loved you from the moment you caught me in the snow, and I'll love you until I take my last breath. And beyond that," Harrison said, kissing her gently. "I'll love you beyond that and into whatever comes next. In every life, in every version of the universe, I'll find you. I'll always find you." The children grew. Henry developed into a responsible young man, serious about the ranch and his future role in running it. Hugh discovered a love of books and learning, and after much discussion, Harrison and Clara decided to send him to school in Virginia City when he turned 14. It was hard to let him go, but they wanted their children to have every opportunity to pursue their dreams, even if those dreams led them away from the ranch. Caroline proved to be as headstrong as predicted, but also brilliant and creative. She had her mother's love of learning and her father's intuition about people and animals. By the time she was 12, she was helping Harrison with the horses, showing a natural talent for training that exceeded even his own. In 1898, when the ranch was well established and the children mostly grown, Clara decided to open a small school for ranch children in the area. It had taken 15 years, but she finally got to teach after all, combining her old dream with her new life in a way that satisfied her completely. She held classes in the largest room of their house, teaching reading and writing and arithmetic to a rotating group of students from surrounding ranches. Harrison supported the endeavor completely, even building an addition onto the house to serve as a proper classroom. He would often stop by during lessons, ostensibly to fix something or check on the stove, but really just to watch Clara teach. She was magnificent in her element, patient but demanding, able to make even the most reluctant student excited about learning. "You're a natural," Harrison told her one evening after her students had gone home. "Watching you teach, seeing how much those kids adore you, it makes me wish I'd had a teacher like you when I was a boy." "You would have been a terrible student," Clara teased. "Too restless to sit still, always looking out the window and planning your escape." "Probably true," Harrison admitted with a laugh. "But for you, I might have tried to behave." Their life together wasn't perfect. There were hard times, years when cattle prices dropped, droughts that tested their endurance, illnesses that scared them, arguments that left them both angry and hurt. But through all of it, the foundation Harrison had seen in his dream held strong. They were partners, equals, best friends as well as lovers. When times were hard, they faced them together. When times were good, they celebrated together. In 1900, Henry married a sweet-natured girl from a neighboring ranch. Harrison deeded him a portion of the land to start his own operation, and Clara watched with pride and a touch of melancholy as her eldest son built his own life. But he stayed close, coming by often with his wife, and when their first grandchild was born the following year, Clara understood a whole new level of joy. Hugh finished his education and surprised everyone by deciding to become a teacher himself. He took a position at a school in Reno, staying close enough to visit regularly but far enough to forge his own path. Clara was so proud she cried when he told her, understanding that in some way he was honoring the dreams she had put aside to build her life with Harrison. Caroline was the last to leave home and the most reluctant. She loved the ranch, loved the work, loved the freedom of wide open spaces. She had no interest in the conventional life expected of young women. When she was 20, she announced that she wanted to start a horse training operation on the property, breeding and training working horses for ranches throughout Nevada. "Are you sure?" Harrison asked, though Clara could see he was delighted by the idea. "It's hard, dirty work. People might talk." "Let them talk," Caroline said with a toss of her head. "You and Mother taught me to make my own way, to not let other people's expectations limit me. This is what I want to do." "Then you have our full support," Clara said firmly, "and anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me." So Caroline stayed, building her business alongside her father's ranch operation. She proved to have inherited both her parents' stubbornness and their business sense, and within 5 years, Xavier horses were sought after throughout the territory. On a crisp fall day in 1910, Harrison and Clara sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as Harrison had seen in his dream all those years ago. They were older now, both past 50, their hair touched with gray and their faces lined with the marks of a life fully lived. But when Clara looked at Harrison, she still saw the young man who had emerged from a blizzard to save her life. And when Harrison looked at Clara, he still saw the woman he had dreamed about, the one who had become his entire world. "We've had a good run," Harrison said, taking Clara's hand. Their fingers intertwined automatically, the gesture as natural as breathing after more than a quarter-century together. "We're not done yet," Clara protested. "Don't talk like we're at the end." "Not the end. But we're in the afternoon of our lives now, looking toward evening. And I just want to say, while I'm thinking about it, thank you. Thank you for taking a chance on a crazy man with a dream. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for every day, every moment, every memory. You've made me happier than I ever imagined possible." Clara felt tears welling up, the good kind. "You saved my life that day in the storm. But more than that, you gave me a life worth living. A life full of love and purpose and joy. I never would have found any of this if you hadn't been out there searching for me. I would have searched forever if that's what it took." Harrison raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "In this life and any other, I'll always find you. That's my promise." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and purple. Across the yard, they could see lights coming on in the various buildings: Henry's house, where he lived with his wife and 3 children; the bunkhouse where Caroline stayed when she was working late with the horses; the barn where the animals were settling in for the night. "We built something good here," Clara said softly. "Not just the ranch, but something bigger. A family, a legacy, a place where people know they're loved and valued. That's what I'm most proud of." "Me too." Harrison put his arm around her shoulders and Clara leaned into him, fitting perfectly against his side the way she had since that first night in the cabin. Though I have to admit, I'm also pretty proud of our children. Henry's as fine a rancher as I've ever known. Hugh's making a difference in those kids' lives, the way you made a difference in your students. And Caroline, that girl's going to build an empire if someone doesn't stop her. No one could stop Caroline, Clara said with a laugh. She's far too determined. Wonder where she gets that from. Definitely from you, Clara Sheffield Xavier. You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met, and you know it. Clara turned to look at her husband, seeing the love shining in his eyes. After all these years, it still took her breath away sometimes, the depth of feeling between them. I love you, Harrison Xavier. I've loved you since the day you found me in that blizzard, and I'll love you until the stars burn out. I love you too. Harrison kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. My Clara, my everything. As darkness fell, and the stars began to appear in the vast Nevada sky, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, watching their world settle into night. Inside, they could hear Caroline moving around in the kitchen, probably making herself something to eat after a long day working with the horses. From Henry's house came the sound of children laughing. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. This was their life. This was the dream Harrison had seen, and the reality they had built together, not perfect, but real and rich and full of love. From a chance meeting in a blizzard to this moment, decades later, sitting together and watching the night come on, it had been an extraordinary journey. You know what I think, Clara said, breaking the comfortable silence. What's that? I think that storm didn't just save my life. I think it was always meant to happen, that somehow, some way, the universe knew we were supposed to find each other. Everything that came before, every choice that led us to that mountain on that day, it was all leading to us together. Harrison smiled, that slow, warm smile that still made Clara's heart skip. I've always believed that. From the moment I dreamed about you, I knew we were meant to be. Destiny, fate, the universe, call it whatever you want. All I know is that I found you when you needed finding, and you found me right back. They stayed there until the cold drove them inside, and even then, they didn't fully part. They moved through their evening routine together, as they had for over 25 years, banking the fire, checking the doors, climbing the stairs to their room. And when they finally slipped into bed, Clara in Harrison's arms, they fell asleep with smiles on their faces and love in their hearts. In the years that followed, they would face more challenges and more joys. They would welcome more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. They would weather economic downturns and personal losses. They would grow older, slower, their bodies giving way to time as all bodies must. But through everything, the core of them remained unchanged, two souls who had found each other in a blizzard and chosen, every single day after, to keep choosing each other. When Harrison died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Clara held his hand and told him she would see him again. She lived another 5 years after that, surrounded by children and grandchildren, teaching until her last days, tending the ranch she and Harrison had built together. And when she passed, sitting in her favorite chair on the porch watching a summer sunset, her family said she went with a smile on her face, as if she could see someone waiting for her just beyond the veil. They buried her beside Harrison on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, Clara Sheffield Xavier, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, teacher. She was found in a storm and loved forever after. And if sometimes, on winter nights when the snow falls heavy and the wind howls down from the mountains, visitors to the ranch say they can see two figures standing on the porch, holding hands and watching the storm together, well, who's to say they're wrong? Some loves are strong enough to echo through time itself. Some connections can't be broken, not by death or distance or anything else the world might throw at them. Harrison had promised he would always find Clara in this life and any other, and he had kept that promise. They had found each other in a blizzard, two people meant to be together, and they had built a love that would last not just one lifetime but forever. The snow had made her visible against the white, and he had found her. That was where their story had begun, but it was far from where it ended. Their story was told and retold by their descendants, a tale of destiny and courage, and the kind of love that comes along once in a generation if you're lucky. The ranch itself stood for many more decades, eventually becoming a historical landmark, the Xavier name synonymous with quality horses and strong values throughout Nevada. Henry's great-great-grandchildren still worked the land, still told the story of how it all began with a man who dreamed of a woman in a storm and went out to find her against all logic and reason. And on winter nights when the snow falls and the wind blows cold, people in the area say that if you listen carefully, you can hear the echo of a voice calling through the storm, "I've been searching for you," and another voice answering back, full of joy and recognition and love, "I know. I've been waiting." Because that's the thing about true love, the kind that Harrison and Clara shared. It doesn't end. It doesn't fade. It echoes through time, inspiring those who come after, reminding everyone who hears their story that sometimes, against all odds and logic, two souls can find each other exactly when they need to, and from that moment forward, everything changes. The snow made her visible. He was searching. They found each other, and they lived, truly lived, building a life filled with love and laughter and purpose. That was their story. That was their legacy. And it endured, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of believing in something bigger than yourself, of taking a chance on love even when it seems impossible, of trusting that sometimes the universe knows exactly what it's doing when it brings two people together in the most unlikely of circumstances. Harrison and Clara Xavier. Two people who met in a blizzard and loved each other through decades of life, building something beautiful and lasting that would outlive them both. That was the true miracle, not the prophetic dream or the chance meeting, but what they did with the gift they'd been given. They honored it. They nurtured it. They let it grow into something magnificent. And in doing so, they created a love story for the ages, one that would be told and retold as long as there were people left to tell it.